The whistle blew inside a building where no whistle had sounded in 31 years. That single note reached me on the demolition scaffold, 60 feet above the collapsing east stand of Estadio Verdanho, and my ratchet wrench dropped straight through my open fingers into the dark below. I never heard it hit the ground. I want you to hold on to that detail. A steel wrench falling 60 feet into a concrete bowl made no sound. My name is Tomas Reveur. For 19 years, I ran structural demolition crews across 4 provinces, and I have knocked down grandstands, cooling towers, a cathedral annex, and a flooded parking garage full of drowned cars. I feared none of them. I feared Estadio Verdanho from the first morning, and by the last night, I understood exactly why the local men refused the contract, why 3 separate crews before mine had abandoned their deposits and driven home, why the municipality had paid us triple rate to arrive from outside the valley, where nobody knew the old word for the place. The old word was Boca de Terra, mouth of earth. The stadium was built over it in 1949, and the stadium was never meant to be a stadium at all. It was meant to be a lid. I learned this too late. Let me lay the ground the way it was laid for me, brick by cold brick. Estadio Verdanho hosted its last official match in 1982, a World Cup qualifier that the regional records list as abandoned in the 73rd minute due to, and I quote the archived match report I later held in my own hands, quote, subsidence of the pitch and unrest among personnel, end quote. No goals, no final score, no official cause of death for the 4 players who never walked back out of the underground player tunnel. The record does not mention the 4 players. I found their names carved into the tunnel wall, but I am getting ahead of the mouth. The demolition company gave me a site file 3 centimeters thick. Most of it was standard, load calculations, asbestos surveys, a groundwater report flagged with a red municipal stamp I had never seen before, a stamp shaped like an open circle with a line through it. My site engineer, a quiet Belgian named Aldous Kerr, told me the stamp meant the water table under the stadium was legally classified as, and he read this off the document with a strange, flat voice. Quote, non-potable and non-recoverable due to historical interment, end quote. Historical interment. I asked him what was interred. He said the file did not say. He was lying. He knew. Aldous had grown up 2 valleys over, and Aldous knew the whole thing, and Aldous stayed on the job anyway, because his wife was sick, and the triple rate would cover her treatment, and I will carry the weight of what happened to Aldous for the rest of my shortened life. We arrived in October. The stadium sat in a bowl of gray hills, like a cracked tooth in a gray jaw. The concrete had gone the color of old bone. Grass grew through the terraces in yellow blades, but not on the pitch itself. The pitch was perfectly bare. 31 years of abandonment, and not one weed, not one dandelion, not one blade of anything had grown on the playing surface. My groundskeeper instinct told me the soil was salted or poisoned. Aldous told me, quietly, that the soil was, quote, listening, end quote, and then he apologized and said he had not slept. The first 4 days were ordinary. We rigged the east stand for controlled collapse. We surveyed the tunnel that connected the 2 locker rooms beneath the stands, the underground player tunnel, 140 meters of downward-sloping concrete throat that dipped far deeper than any player tunnel needs to dip. Standard tunnels run flat or gently curved. This one descended. It descended 11 meters below pitch level before leveling, which put its lowest point well below the water table, and yet the tunnel was bone dry. bone dry, over a water table classified as non-recoverable. I noted the contradiction. I noted it, and I did nothing. Because contradictions do not kill demolition crews. Ropes and dust and gravity kill demolition crews. On the 5th night, I stayed late alone to inspect the tunnel supports. This is where the whistle blew, though I did not yet know the whistle. That came later. On the 5th night, what I found was the cement. Halfway down the descending tunnel, the concrete floor turned soft. Not cracked, not flooded, soft, the way wet cement is soft before it cures, and I pressed my glove into it, and my glove came away gray and cold and wet, and I felt something under the softness push gently back against my palm. Not a rock, not a pipe. Something that pushed back with the specific, unhurried pressure of a hand testing a hand. I pulled away. I told myself it was a broken water main under decades of settled slurry. I told myself the pushing back was hydraulic rebound. I am a rational man, and I lied to myself with the full weight of my rationality, and I climbed back up the tunnel, and I saw them. 11 pairs of cleats, standing in the middle of the tunnel where nothing had stood 10 minutes earlier. When I walked down, 11 pairs of old leather football boots, the high-cut kind from the 70s, arranged in a perfect formation, a wing formation, the way a team lines up before it walks out onto the pitch, every lace tied, every boot empty, and every boot pointed up the tunnel toward the pitch, toward the surface, toward the mouth. I want you to understand, I did not run that first time. I am ashamed to say I laughed, a short, ugly laugh, because my mind reached for prank, reached for the local men, reached for anything but the truth. I photographed the boots. The photographs came out black. Every one black, though my headlamp was bright and my phone worked perfectly on the walk back to the trailer. I showed Aldous the black photographs in the morning. Aldous did not laugh. Aldous set down his coffee with hands that had begun, very slightly, to shake, and Aldous told me the story his grandmother had beaten into him as a boy, so that he would never, ever, dig in the valley of Boca de Terra. This is the story. Before the stadium, before the town, before the church whose annex I would later learn I had also demolished across the province, there was a mouth in the earth. Not a cave. A mouth. The old people of the valley believed the land beneath the bowl was not solid, but sleeping, that a vast buried thing lay with its jaws just below the topsoil, and that the thing fed not on flesh, but on motion, on the movement of the living, on footsteps. The valley people had a ritual older than any written record, and the ritual was this. Once a generation, when the land grew hungry, and the crops failed, and the cattle sank into soft ground that had been firm the day before, the valley chose 11 men. Not sacrifices, Aldous stressed, not killed. Chosen. The 11 strongest walkers, the 11 best runners, and these 11 would descend into the mouth, and they would run. They would run in place, in formation, in the dark, for a full day and a full night, feeding the sleeping thing with the motion of their bodies, and at dawn they would climb out, exhausted, hollowed, aged 20 years in a night, and the land would sleep another generation. The mouth ate their movement and left their bodies. That was the bargain. Motion for peace. When the modern men came in 1949 to build a stadium, they laughed at the ritual the way I laughed at the boots. They poured the lid. They built the bowl. They filled it. Every match day, with 11 running men on the pitch and 40,000 stamping, roaring, moving bodies in the stands. And for 33 years, the mouth feasted on the greatest offering it had ever known. And the mouth was content. And the valley never questioned why Estadio Verdanho drew crowds far larger than its little town could ever explain. Why teams played there with a desperate, frenzied energy. Why the grass under the pitch had to be replaced every single season because it died from below. The mouth ate the motion of the game. Then, in 1982, the mouth got greedy. Aldous said his grandmother had wept, telling this part. In the 73rd minute of the qualifier, the pitch began to sink, slowly, a shallow depression forming at the center circle, and the referee, sensing catastrophe, ordered the players off. The players ran for the tunnel, the underground player tunnel, the throat, the direct descending line into the deep. 15 men entered the tunnel from the pitch that day, both teams and officials fleeing the sinking grass. 11 walked back out. The mouth, denied its steady feast by the panicked stoppage of the match, took its generation's tithe all at once, and it took it from the men closest to the deep, the men in the tunnel. 4 never emerged. The records call it unrest among personnel. Aldous called it the last tithe. The stadium was sealed within the month, the tunnel walled at both ends, the site legally interred, the groundwater classified as non-recoverable, which Aldous now translated for me, plainly, which meant, the thing is still down there, and the water is its spit, and do not, Tomas. Please, do not wake it with your machines. I fired Aldous. God forgive me, I told myself he was a superstitious local trying to sabotage a job he could not emotionally handle, and I ordered the tunnel wall breached that same afternoon so we could survey the deep section before we packed it with explosives. I told the crew it was a water main issue. We breached the far wall at 4 in the afternoon. Behind it, the tunnel continued down, past where any tunnel should go, and the walls of that deep section were not poured concrete. They were carved, ribbed, curved inward at regular intervals, like the roof of a throat, like the inside of a mouth held permanently open, and along the left wall, at the height of a standing man, were the names. 4 names, carved deep, carved by fingernails, carved from the inside, as if the men had stood there in the dark and scratched their identities into the stone for a day and a night before they stopped being able to scratch. Ferreira, Bastos, the 2 Almeida brothers. Below the 4th name, the carving degraded into a single continuous scored line that ran on for 40 meters down the throat, a line at exactly the height a running man's trailing hand would drag along a wall, on and on, the record of feet that had run in that dark for far longer than a single day and night, far longer than 31 years. The scoring was fresh. New pale stone showed at the leading edge of the scratch. They were still running. Down there, in the sealed and interred and legally non-recoverable dark, 4 dead men were still running in formation to feed the mouth, because the bargain had never been closed, because 1982 had been an interruption, and not a completion, and the mouth was owed the rest of its tithe, and the mouth had been waiting 31 years, with its throat sealed and its meal still moving inside it. And now I had opened the throat. That was when the whistle blew. It came from the deep, from below the 4 names, a long, clean referee's whistle that meant, in the language of every football pitch on earth, stop. Halt. The match is suspended, and the scoring line on the wall stopped growing. The running, 31 years of it, stopped. The silence that followed was the worst sound I have ever not heard, and into that silence came the wet cement. It rose up the throat toward us, the soft gray slurry I had touched on the 5th night, rising like a tide. And in the slurry rose the boots, the 11 pairs standing upright, walking up the incline in perfect formation. And behind the 11 walked 4 things that had once been Ferreira and Bastos and the Almeida brothers. 4 figures gray and soft, and stretched thin by 3 decades of running in place, their legs still pumping, still running even as they rose, running up out of their own graves toward the surface, toward the pitch, toward 40,000 empty seats and the memory of 40,000 roaring bodies, because the mouth did not want to eat them. The mouth wanted them to lead it up. It wanted to finish the meal that stopped in the 73rd minute. It wanted to come out onto the pitch and finally, eat the motion of the whole valley, the whole province, every living, moving thing under the gray hills. And my breech had rung the whistle that restarts the match. My crew ran. I want to say I led them to safety. I did not. 3 men made the surface. I made the surface, bleeding from the ears from a pressure that came out of the deep like a swallowed breath reversing. 2 men did not make the surface. Hollis and a young Portuguese kid named Denise. The last I saw of them, the wet cement had them to the knees, and they were not screaming. They were running in place, their faces going slack and gray and content, joining the formation. And the whistle blew a second time, a starting whistle, and the mouth began, after 31 years, to feed again. Here is the ending, and I will give it to you closed and final, the way it was given to me, so that you never come looking for this valley. I did not run. Not away. I turned around at the tunnel mouth, at the breach, with the rising gray tide and the 14 running figures, and the whole hungry throat opening below me. And I did the only thing a demolition man carries in his chest instead of a whistle. I had the charges. The full east stand sequence, 41 shaped charges, all wired to a single detonator, clipped to my belt, all packed and ready for a morning I would never reach. I stood in the mouth of the earth, with the mouth of the earth opening under me. And I thought of Aldous' grandmother weeping, and I thought of the bargain, motion for peace, and I understood the only offering large enough to close a throat that had been open since 1949. Not motion. Stillness. Permanent, absolute, buried stillness. I detonated the entire stadium, with myself standing inside the tunnel. The east stand came down first, then the west, then the 200,000 tons of the bowl folded inward and down. The concrete lid that men had poured in 1949, collapsing at last into the throat it was always meant to seal. And the wet cement, and the 11 boots, and the 4 running dead, and the young kid named Denise, and the man named Hollis, and the mouth of the earth itself were buried under a mountain of pulverized concrete that will not be moved by any machine that exists, and the whistle, mid-note, stopped. I am telling you this from a bed I will not leave. The blast took my legs, both of them, gone below the knee, crushed under the same concrete that closed the mouth. And I have accepted that as the price, and I have accepted it gladly. Because when I lie in the dark now, I do not feel the ground listening anymore. The valley is quiet. The crops, they tell me, grew back this spring, thick and green over a bowl of buried concrete where a stadium used to stand. Aldous visits. His wife recovered. He does not say I told you so. He only sits with me. And once he brought his grandmother's rosary and laid it on my chest. And he told me the old people had a second half to the ritual that the modern men never learned. A closing rite for when the bargain finally ends. And it was this. When the mouth is at last sealed forever, one man must remain still on top of it, unmoving until the earth forgets the taste of motion. So I lie here. I do not run. I will never run again. And I am the last offering the valley will ever need, the stillness that pays for a peace with no next generation. And when I am gone, they will bury me in that green bowl over the buried stadium, over the buried mouth, and I will be still there too, forever, and the land will sleep. And that, finally, is a bargain closed.